this meeting together, that I believe that all three supervisors were of the like mind, that there is an issue with some of the coverage in the county, specifically in the northwest quadrant, and that this can had been kicked down the road for several years. We needed to get away from a position where there was any finger pointing and just get the problem solved. So I asked you guys if we could put this meeting together, get the individuals from Raycom to give us a proposal, bring in a small team of individuals from our staff to work on this, and I'd like to go forward with that. I believe the county's position is, without question, we believe that some things need to be fixed and be done, and we're probably going to get down to the point of how we're going to pay for this. Everybody's going to have some skin in the game, and we just need to make this work in some fashion.
There's two elements of this, and sometimes when you have people like myself who are not involved, have not been involved in this equipment before, get mixed up here a little bit. We've got towers and the equipment on the towers. That's one issue. And then we have the radios and the maintenance of those radios, and that's a separate issue. So when we talk about those things, you people who have spent your life working on these, this is pretty easy talk for you. But remember, not all of us are on the same step yet. So help us out a little bit when we talk about those things. Would we want to start? Where do we want to start out, Steve? You want to start out talking about the towers and the equipment on the towers and so on and so forth, or you want to start out with the radios? The radios won't work.
Let's start.
Go ahead.
Let's start with the tower. Let's start with the towers here. Let's go that direction first.
Steve, this is Mike Miller. Would you mind if I gave you just a little background just to try and level set?
Absolutely. Yes, Mike.
Okay, yeah, sure. So, Bill, this is maybe some background that you already know, so feel free to stop me if you want. The county county first responders operate on two different public safety radio systems. You've got one radio system, which is modern, current, new, that is used primarily by Marshalltown Police and Fire, the Marshall County Sheriff's Office, and a few county agencies like State Center Police is one, but mostly it's Marshall County Sheriff and Marshalltown. That's one, and that radio system is owned by Raycom, and the users pay a monthly fee for that use. And there's a second radio system that is owned by the county that is used primarily by county fire agencies, volunteer fire agencies. That radio system is old and outdated. And so Rhonda's dispatch center is communicating with first responders on two separate radio systems that are owned in two separate ways, one owned by Raycom and one owned by the county. And so this entire project is really about trying to get all of the first responders onto one radio system, a current, modern, digital radio system that isn't end of life. And so that's really what we're trying to talk about. And the tricky part of all this is, okay, it's expensive. There's two different ones now, and they're owned in two different ways. And so everything that Chief Fonts and us have tried to do over the last several months is to try and figure out the right way to do that. And so that's sort of, the background behind all of this, Bill. I don't know if that answers a couple of your questions or if I've just restated the obvious. If I haven't.
No, that's fine. Back to what the county owns. Can you describe that just quickly? What the county actually owns then on that older system?
Yes, sir. So I'll call on some of my colleagues to help me with this, but this is the system that you own is the county fire radio system. That's the system that is at its end of life, and that we've worked very, very hard on over a number of years to try and keep going at the level of reliability that you even have now, which is probably not good enough because the system is at end of life. And I'll call on either Diana or Clint, and Clint, I see you're muted, to describe where the county fire towers are and what specifically you own there. Could one of you two go through that for Bill?
I'm going to pass that to Clint because I think he's got a better understanding of the existing network.
Yeah, there's currently 5 sites in the county. The main control point, which is kind of the brain for the system, is located at the comm center. There's also a site in Liscum, a site on a grain leg down in Ferguson at I think it's the Pickering plant. One out at Westfire, which is a water tower on 30 near State Center. And then there's a newer site that's at Collins, which is the tower down on 330, kind of north of the Harvester. Those would be the 5 main fire sites that are located in the county.
So the one down in Collins would be in State Center. So do we share, or Story City rather, Story County? Do we share that then with Story County?
For the county fire part, you do not. It's there may be some mutual aid where they would use it for outside agencies, but for the most part, it's to serve that corner of the county.
So what serves Marshall County, that technology or whatever that piece of equipment is called, that sits on the tower, but it's just used mostly then for the most part by Marshall County. Is that, do I'm understanding then?
Yeah, that's right, Bill. This you're talking about the Collins site. That site is, you're right, physically located in Story County, but literally it's like 400 meters across the county line. If you drive down to Des Moines and you're driving past the Harvester and you look off to the right, there is a really large concrete slip form tower. It used to be an old AT&T microwave site. That's actually the site that we're talking about. That's where it's located. So it's not actually in the town of Collins. It's just reasonably close to there. That's why we call it.
Yeah. Okay. So is that big concrete structure? Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Very good. I'm getting educated here slowly. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So Mike, just a quick question. We do not own these towers. We only own the equipment that is accessed on the tower.
I'm not sure that's, are any of these sites structures, Clint, that the county owns?
The comm center would be owned. Well, I guess it'd be by either the city or the commission. Liscum, it's on a utility pole that's at the fire station in Liscum. The rest of them would be, like I say, one's on a water tank, one's on a green leg, and the other one's at Collins, which is there's a monthly rental fee for that, so, or yearly fee.
And so, Bill, this is the system, this 5-site system is the one that Chief Fonts has given lots of presentations to you over the months about it being old and not as reliable as it should be, not providing the coverage that it should, and needing to be replaced. So that's the system. That's the system we're talking about.
Okay. Yep.
Let me ask a question. When Rhonda receives a call and she sends it on out, does she have to work with 2 different radio systems then? Is she duplicating her effort, or does it all happen with one movement there? I don't know how she does it.
Basically what it's doing is the way that they have it set up is it works together through the system, but there's almost like a relay is how you can put it. And when it goes through that relay, that's what is causing the majority of the problem, because you are in fact dealing with 2 different radio systems. So when the call goes out and the page goes out and the information goes out, that delay in the radio system is what is causing the majority of the issues. And when that falters, it just makes everything worse. Do I have that right, Clint?
Yeah, you page off your main consoles there at dispatch,
Right.
and it goes across a network out to all the sites, and then it's keyed up on VHF, and that's both for your two-tone paging to alert the responders and also their voice channel to respond and communicate on for their
Correct. Yeah.
So Steve, to answer the question, the dispatch center is all very modern, new equipment, and a dispatcher interfaces with these two radio systems through their dispatch console, which is, to the dispatcher, it is a computer screen and foot switches and a headset. And so a dispatcher can interface with either radio system from the same dispatch console, but they're talking out over two different radio systems, depending on who they're talking to.
Correct.
Okay. In the short term, is there any value in separating those so that you could understand better, or is that not an option?
Yeah, Steve, I don't think that the interface between the dispatcher and the radio system is the issue. The issue is really the age, reliability, and coverage of the system that they're talking to, this VHF county fire radio system.
Mike, of the 5 different towers or areas that we've got, do we have one that is in more critical need than the others?
Clint, can you answer that one? I know you've talked about West Fire and Ferguson from time to time, but you can probably answer that more accurately than I can.
Yeah, those would be the two. The West Fire, the water tank it's at, the equipment's located it's not in like a concrete shelter or any sort of newer construction. It's in an outdoor cabinet. So anytime we have rain, snow, any sort of weather, and we have to work on that, it makes it more difficult. The other site that's at Pickering, the grain leg, it's up on top of a house up on top of the shelter. And it's just got grain dust, and it's probably not the most ideal location for that equipment, but it works okay. So those would probably be the worst two, just because of the weather, temperature, dust, all that sort of stuff.
Well, and on top of that, Clint, we've also had vermin issues out there as well. And so that poses a problem, because when the equipment isn't properly encapsulated, that's going to cause more issues, because they will go after that stuff.
Correct.
One of the issues to understand about the county fire radio system, in addition to its age, it operates at a different set of frequencies than the more modern P25 radio system that your sheriff's office in Marshtown uses. One of them, the county fire radio system, operates at what we call VHF. That are the frequencies that county fire radio system is on. VHF, that band is located, just for your information, just above the FM radio dial. If your FM radio dial ends at 107.9, VHF is about 150 megahertz. So it's just above the FM radio dial, where the city radio system and the sheriff's office radio system operate at 800 megahertz, which is about where US Cellular operates their cellular network, just to give you some frame of reference. And lots of agencies in the state have moved away from VHF frequencies after a federally mandated operation called narrowbanding. Maybe you've heard of this term, narrowbanding. And Bill, I'm sure you have, being on the commission.
Oh, yeah.
Narrowbanding happened almost 10 years ago now, where the federal government said, okay, you're operating in this much spectrum, you have to operate in half as much spectrum. And so what that did was it shrank the coverage area of the radio system. So a radio system that had poor coverage had even worse coverage. And so, and probably that's most, that shows most to a county volunteer firefighter on their pager. Their pager operates worse today than it ever did before because of narrowbanding. And so that's one of the reasons why you've seen lots of counties in Iowa move away from VHF for their voice communications and move towards a 700 or 800 megahertz system like the city uses.
Mike, going back 10 years, how come we didn't take this step then?
Yeah.
And should we have?
So probably most of the counties that have made that change made it around the narrow banding time, because what they decided at the time is, I got to spend money on something. I might as well move away from the old car and buy a new car. And so that's when a lot of them did it. And I think you actually tried to put some Band-Aids on the system and add a little coverage to it then, and spent a little bit of money. Clint, maybe you can come off of mute and talk about some of the things that were tried from 2011 to now. And so really what this project is about is, okay, these Band-Aids don't really work very well. We really all need to be on the same radio system. That will provide the best coverage, the best interoperability. And so that's what this is about. But there have been some Band-Aids put along between 2011 and now. Clint, can you describe those?
Yeah, there were two upgrades. The first one was to add the call-in site, and also at that time make the system simulcast. So instead of being a zone system where you'd have 4 or 5 different sites, the dispatchers would have 4 or 5 different tiles to monitor. It's one now. It's one big system versus being 5 smaller systems. The second upgrade was to add the repeated option. So it was no longer just a simplex base system, it's actually repeated. So when a user talks in or dispatch talks, it goes across the whole county versus radio to radio. So those were the two bigger upgrades several years ago.
Can I go back and ask about the antenna that's at Pickering? You say that it's not the best situation there on that one. Is there consideration to maybe move? I'm wondering if we could put an antenna on top of the concrete tower that's there in Ferguson, or just outside of Ferguson. And then we're also talking about an antenna on the water tower at LeGrand. Would that work, or is that not something that would work very well?
So Steve, I think your questions are really, is there a way to, is the question, is there a way to make my current system better? Is that kind of your question?
No, I'm just wondering if, since it's kind of a bad situation there at Pickering, I know you've got the height there, and that's great, but I wonder if we should have an antenna there at the concrete facility, AT&T facility there at Ferguson, and then also we would put up a new one then at LeGrand. Would that still give us the coverage that we want, or do we just need to keep one there at Pickering?
I think ideally what you want to do is get off of the VHF system and invest the money in moving over to the 7800 P25 system, so that you're putting any investment into moving to current technology, because the age of the equipment, the VHF equipment at those 5 sites is so old that moving an antenna around isn't going to change the fact that that equipment is at end of life now.
I think you're misunderstanding me. No, I agree we have to do something here, but I'm just asking, do we want to get facility off of Pickering? Is that something long-term that you would like to do, or that we need to do, or we can make it work satisfactorily there, even with the new system? Let's assume we're putting in a brand new system.
So if you were going to put in a new system, the site at Pickering would go away eventually. And so the new system would replace. That's what I was trying to get. Yeah, the new system would replace Pickering. So almost all the, Pickering and Westfire, the Liscum Fire Station, those sites for county fire use would go away. So that system would be decommissioned. And so, a project like this, if you were to move to the new system, a project like this would take 18 to 24 months to build out. And at the end of that time, those county fire sites would be decommissioned and go away. And so whatever investment you put into that system now would really only be good for the next 24 months or so.
Okay, still talking about towers now.
Yes.
You brought up the possibility here, or the design to have one on the water tower. there in LeGrand. And from what I've heard in past meetings, that's an acceptable mission. Is that you people here, Diana or Mike? What's your thoughts there?
So, Bill, everything that I've heard through Diana and Chief Fonts is that the city of LeGrand is open to allowing a antenna on that water tower for use by county first responders. I
Okay.
haven't talked to them myself, so I haven't heard it, but Chief Fonts has said that they are open to that. And so so when we designed the coverage of the new system, we utilized that LeGrand water tower as one of the sites, because of that affirmation from Chief Fonts.
And Mike, will there be necessary to build a new tower?
Yeah.
And is that the one in the northwest quadrant of the county?
Yeah, that's right. So we designed a new tower to be built up in the northwest portion of the county in between. I don't know who owns the ground that we modeled it on, but somewhere between Clemens and St. Anthony. And when we design coverage, we look at the kind of coverage that a first responder needs, generally in-building coverage with a portable radio, and then based on where the existing sites are, where to build new sites to get that kind of coverage in the most cost-effective manner. And so adding 2 additional modern P25 sites to the county, one in LeGrand and one up on this new tower, is what we determined was the least costly way to get the coverage that you need.
How much ground, Mike, does it take for a tower? A quarter of an acre or?
Yeah, so it depends a lot on how tall the tower is. I think Matt Gable, one of my coverage engineers, is on the phone. Maybe he can come off of mute and tell you how much ground for this specific tower.
So yes, this is Matt. For this tower, it would be a self-support tower, and what we typically do is we encompass that tower in like a 50-foot by 50-foot fenced compound, and so your shelter, your generator, LP tank would be inside that compound. So really, that's the amount of land we need, and then of course, if it's in a field, we would also need that easement for the lane or the access to come off the road and go to that tower site. So we're not talking about a lot of land.
No. That's less than I thought. So yeah, good.
So Bill, just in case you hadn't heard the term before, Matt used the term self-support tower. And so you've got towers that have guy wires, like I'm looking out my office window, I can see the Kix 101 radio transmission tower on Iowa Avenue. That's a guy tower. Or you can look farther down Iowa Avenue to the east, and the Marshalltown P25 site is a self-support tower, which doesn't have guy wires. It's supported by itself.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of tower that we were contemplating building in this design in the northwest part of the county.
And that's the tower you're talking about the county owning?
That's right, sir. Yep.
Okay, now if we own that tower, is it just going to be for our equipment, or can we hang other pieces of equipment off of it and have a revenue source?
Yeah, generally when we design these, and I'll ask Matt to confirm for me, but generally when we design them for the load that we require plus additional load, so that if there was, for example, a cellular carrier that wanted to add coverage to that part of the county, that they could lease space and generate revenue for the county. Yeah, Matt, can you tell them for how much additional load that we designed that tower for?
Yes, that's correct, Mike. And it's typically, right around that $20,000 to $30,000 mark, additional cost if we want to design that tower for a cell carrier to go on there. Like that one cell carrier, it would be about a $20,000 to $30,000 increase in the tower cost, and then as you increase the number of cell carriers on there, of course, it increases by that. But then also to allow those cell carriers to put their shelters and generators in that compound as well, then that compound actually expands too. So you're looking at more of a 75, 85 square foot compound versus a 50 square foot compound.
If that's the case, what type of revenue would those additional cell phone companies bring in?
Yeah, so best example I can think of quickly on this is Grundy County. We built a site for Grundy County Sheriff up at the Grundy County Engineers office property just north of Grundy Center. We built a 300-foot tower for them, and AT&T came to them I don't know, 3 or 4 months after they built it, and I think that AT&T is paying the Grundy County Board of Supervisors like $800 a month for that particular site. But I know that rents, that's kind of a low end. And I know that rents go clear up into the couple thousand a month kind of range. So there's a wide range depending on what they want to put on a tower, but that's a good example of one we did recently.
Okay, so there is some possibility for a little return on investment.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I know the northwest part of the county, particularly around the Clemens area and a little east, south of Bangor, really poor for cell phones.
Yeah. And so normally when we were designing systems, we try to find existing sites first, because building a new site is costly and it takes a long time. And so we try to find sites that we can lease, like a water tower, like in LeGrand. But in the like you say, Bill, in the northwest part of the county, there just isn't a lot of sites that are suitable for this sort of system.
What kind of height would we be looking at on a tower in this area?
Matt, do you remember off the top of your head what we designed that tower?
So this one, we went back to the original location, but this one I think was 225 foot tall.
Okay.
Now, if we add cell carriers, we want to make sure that we do have room for them to go on those towers. They typically, with one cell array where all their antennas are at the same level, they take up about a 10 to 15 foot vertical space on those towers.
And that 225-foot tower, what was the price tag on that one?
Well, the price was bundled in with shelters, generators, fencing, quite a bit of different additional equipment. So we had civils costs, the total civils cost for the project, which includes all your site sheltering, generators, the getting everything ready, the putting up the site, was $895,000, and that's for work at both the LeGrand site to get everything on that tower or on that water tower, and then also for putting up a whole new site in the Clemens St. Anthony area.
Mike, a question on that, if I may. Just to kind of go off of what Dave was saying, when you're looking at that tower for the 225-foot tower, how many additional spaces on that do you think that could be leased out?
So, Matt, do you know if the tower that you designed and priced, did you design it for extra capacity? And is that included in the price that Diana just quoted? Or would it need to be designed for extra capacity?
So I believe it was with one additional cell carrier for loading. And if we wanted to add more, of course, then we'd have to increase that.
Okay. So
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so Rhonda, the price that we quoted includes capacity for one cell carrier, but maybe not two. And I think what Matt said is it would, did you say an extra $20,000 or $30,000 to design it for an additional cell carrier, Matt?
Yes.
Okay. I think that was your question. I'm sorry if I interrupted.
No, you're fine. But technology is just like anything else. It's designed right now for one cell carrier, but does it have everything that it needs in order to incorporate or operationally function for any cell carrier that wanted to come in and lease that spot?
Oh yeah. So a cell carrier that came in would hang their antennas. Generally, a cell carrier that came in if you build a tower at 220 feet, the P25 first responder radio system would be at the top. Generally, a cell carrier would come in somewhere between 100 and 150 feet. That's just kind of oftentimes where they go. They'd hang their antennas, hang the feed line from the antennas. They'd probably place their own building, their own generator, their own LP tank in that compound area. When Matt said we require 50 by 50, but maybe we'd want 75 by 75 if you're designing it for additional revenue. But yeah, it would be, whether it was AT&T or Verizon or United States Cellular, it would be usable by any of those carriers.
On the 20 to 30,000 to build out for those additional spaces, that's a pretty big gap. Is there a reason there's such a gap, like a $10,000 gap there? Or,
yeah, just because I don't know off the top of my head, but maybe Matt can help.
Yeah. So before they would really do the design, they have to do a geo boring, so that they have to test the soil and what the compaction is there. So that difference really is, how big of a concrete footing do you need for that tower based on the anticipated load. So it varies. It could be 20 if the soil is ideal for placing a tower there. It could be 30 just because they need a lot more concrete to support that load.
Just doing some simple, real quick math on Mike's comment that Hardin County is getting $800 a month. If we take the $30,000 additional cost and divide it into the $800, you've got your investment back in 37.5 months. Very short period of time. After that, you would have additional revenue that could be put into literally a fund for constantly upgrading on this situation. Another question I have is, you know, we kind of got into this 10 years ago with the narrow banding and everything else. How long before the technology that we have today, and I realize this is a hard question, but how long before we're back in the same doggone pile we're in now?
Yeah.
And the can has been kicked down the road and things haven't been upgraded. They haven't been, you know, how long before we're going to be in the same thing where the equipment we're going to put in today is obsolete?
Yeah, this is a great question, and it's one that lots of people in your position, Dave, ask. And it's hard to predict, you know, the crystal ball, but a lot of people ask me to do it. And part of this system design and purchase is the purchase of what I'll call an extended warranty or a maintenance agreement that lasts 10 years. So part of this is that we're guaranteeing that this system will operate at a public safety grade of reliability and redundancy, and we'll keep it up and going for at least 10 years. And so typically we have guaranteed customers anywhere from a low of 7 to a high of 15 in terms of how far out we're willing to guarantee that system is will operate, and we're not back in this situation, Dave. And so in this particular proposal, we guaranteed 10 years that we'd keep the system up and operational for you, and you wouldn't be in a situation where, hey, we're obsolete, what do we do now?
Mike, just going off of his question, and I just want to make sure that I'm clear on this. The current price that was quoted, the $895,000, that included the spot for the one additional carrier. So if we add the 20 or 30,000, then that would be 2 spots, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then again, new girl on the block here, but the current system that we have, hasn't it been in place for almost 20 years? Because of the maintenance that's been continuously, it's kind of like, you know, you can have 2 people with a car, one person never gets maintenance, the other person does, it lasts longer. So do you think that it would, best guesstimate based off of what we have and how it's been taken care of, how long do you think that this could last?
This is a hard question to ask. This is equally hard question to ask as Dave's question. Um, what I would hope, Rhonda, is that we can keep the system going at least its current level of reliability for the time frame of the construction period of building a new system. And so if we said a new system is 18 to 24 months, what we would hope is that we can keep this system going for you at its current level of reliability for 18
No, I apologize. I'm not talking about our current system. I'm talking about the new system. Because with the new system, we would maintain it just as we have been. This one that's lasted us almost 20 years.
Yep.
So when you're saying the new system, you can guarantee it for 10. I'm asking for a best guesstimate that, you know, we're not looking at, okay, in 10 years, we're just going to have to drop the ball and redo everything.
Yeah.
We want to see, you know, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand your point. The difference is a new system is really all computer servers and routers versus the old system wasn't. And so the old system was more mechanical, and if you can buy parts, you can keep it going. The new system, when a vendor changes computer servers or vendor changes routers, sometimes that changes compatibility. And so systems today just don't last as long as the systems in the past. And it's mostly because they're so software and IT driven. And so just like I saw James was on this call, and James would come to the Board of Supervisors and say, we need to update our computers every 3 to 5 years. And so what we're saying is, okay, this P25 radio system is a router server driven system, and we're willing to guarantee that we'll keep it going for 10 years. It's hard to say that I don't know that I would be willing or able to take on the risk to say it'll last 20, because it just has a different foundation to it than your old radio system did.
And Mike, I really appreciate your comments there. And the reason that I asked that question is because, and I think that everyone on this call has at some point in time said at some point in their life that, okay, things just don't last the way that they used to. And it's because we are so technologically driven.
Yep.
And that's why I wanted to get that out there, because we can't just assume, you know, the 10-year guarantee, that's great, but we all need to recognize that we are going into more of a technological age. And with that comes constant change. Nothing ever stays the same. So I just wanted to make sure that that was, you know, out there.
Hey, Mike, Diana, this is Brian Crum. I think that there may be some confusion with some of the folks here about what is actually being offered. You know, I understand it because, you know, I'm a licensed radio geek, but a lot of the other folks may not understand that there's really two separate pieces here that really need to be combined as one. But there's really a new paging system that we're offering, which is a new digital paging system that you guys are going to be offering the county. And then there's a new voice communication system that allows all of first responders to be on the same network and be able to communicate together. I mean, maybe you guys can provide a little more of an overview of what all is actually being here, because I think some people are looking at this as, well, it's just new paging or it's just new radios, and it's really, although they all work together, they're really two separate pieces.
Sure.
Correct?
Sure. Yeah, I can give you a little overview, and Diana, correct me when I venture astray. I know you won't be shy about that. So we have the county fire radio system, like the portable and mobile radios that a volunteer firefighter in the county, that system would be replaced by a new P25 radio system. So a county firefighter would use a portable or mobile radio that is on the same system, a similar type radio to what is used by Marshtown Police, Marshtown Fire, Marshall County Sheriff. So all first responders in the county would be on the same voice radio system. And
they could seamlessly talk to one another.
That's right. That's right. So if you had a Sheriff Hoffman on scene with a Lipscomb firefighter, that they could seamlessly talk to each other on the same radio system. That to do that, we would provide new radios, sell new radios to all those first responders to match the kinds of radios that the sheriff's office has. And we built these 2 new sites, one on the LeGrand Water Tower and one on this new tower site in between Clemens and St. Anthony we were just talking about. And so the coverage on this new voice radio system would be provided primarily by 4 sites within the county. One here in Marshalltown, one at Collins or near Collins, LeGrand, and up in the northwest part of the county, those four sites. And then that county fire voice radio system would be abandoned at the end of the process. In addition, we would move to a new fire paging solution. So the pagers that a volunteer firefighter wears on their hip would move to a new system as well. And so that would to provide them better coverage. And so what this offer does is provide both a new paging system and a new voice radio system for those county first responders. Did I just get to the points that you wanted to, Brian?
Yeah, I think so, Mike, and I think that's a really important piece of it all. And then the new paging system is a digital paging system, so that the firefighter actually would get a digital readout on their pager, knowing where the fire is, what the incident is all about. Correct?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yep.
Mike, I've had one of the fire chiefs in the county tell me that some of the pagers are going out by cell phone now. Is that a factual assessment? Yeah.
So, and Rhonda, I can probably describe this even better than I. But I believe that Rhonda, do they use a program called I Am Responding?
They do, but it's not. They still have to have the radio page. They do get the I Am Responding, but you can't just rely on one or the other. You have to be able to, use them together because it's redundancy.
Yeah.
So you actually have to have both.
Mm-hmm.
Cellular is unreliable. We've had situations in Fayette County where somebody received a page a day late because it didn't come through on their cell phone. So NFPA compliance requires that you do not use cellular as your primary paging protocol.
And not everyone has purchased that system either. So they would have to be purchased by that department. So EMS and fire, some are together, some are separate. So some can buy it, some can't afford it.
Right.
Yeah. And I definitely those pages, or I Am Responding alerts, I would more call them, are coming out late. Depends on what's going on with the system on the cell side. Sometimes you just don't get them.
Yeah, there's in the cellular system, there's no priority. So you're competing with, 12-year-olds updating their Facebook page. So.
Right. Well, and you have to think that, and Kim, just kind of going off of your comments, and you work with all of the smaller agencies and have a lot more knowledge there based than I do, as I'm still newer and I'm learning. But going back to, I think from the very get-go, we all recognize that, and going off of Dave's comments, that the issues are with the Northwest quadrant. We've got a problem to solve. And we need to, get it fixed and make it work. But looking at the technology itself, the technology includes, we've got the towers and then we've got the radios, because you can't just go off of that cell system. If we went off that cell system, then we're going to be missing pieces. And the radio is the piece of equipment that works with the tower. Because then there's not going to be, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, there's no, they're not going to have to pay the actual fees with the radio. That goes with the maintenance fee, because it's not the user fee. Is that correct? So it would be like basically it's a piece of equipment that goes with that. And then Kim, going back to your comment of some of the agencies that can't truly afford it, because is Mary on this call at all? Mary, are you here?
I am.
Okay. If I remember correctly, isn't it like 0.6% or basically what can be levied for in the smaller communities? It's very small portion that is even available, and most of that is even tied up. Is that correct still? Am I understanding that correctly?
Rhonda, I don't know what the small communities can levy. I just only work with the county.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you knew, but
Rhonda, you're right on that. I think it's 0.6078 or something like that.
Is it something like that? And I know, Bill, you and I've had that conversation, and I know that I've talked to Dave about it. And I just, when we're looking at that and looking at, the possibility, basically we've got, and it's my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong here. It's my understanding that we've got the equipment issue, and then we've got the maintenance issue. And right now we're kind of discussing more of the equipment issue. So we're talking about the towers and the radios for these communities, because I think we can all agree the most important thing is coverage for our county. And that means all of the county. I'm sorry, what? I missed that.
I think it was just your own echo.
Oh, I'm echoing. Goodness. Okay. So, and I think that's where I'm at. Did I get any of that wrong, Bill? Do I have that right?
No, that's why when we started, I said there's two issues, towers and radios, and we wanted to start out with the towers, and we haven't really talked about the radio aspect yet. But, I think we've covered the towers pretty well, other than, Mike, do you have a figure on what it would cost-wise to just add an antenna in LeGrand?
I'm sorry, you kind of went in and out there.
Did I go in and out? Okay. Yeah. Do you have a figure in mind approximately what just a tower and the equipment on the tower, an antenna on top of the LeGrand water tower?
So, Bill, are you talking about adding a tower from the old VHF County Fire System, or with the new P25 system?
The new P25.
Okay. Diana, do you have a figure for how much just one tower is? So we're adding two, but how much is just one?
Right, just one tower, you're looking at about 475,000. And that's using the 235 foot that we had figured for the Northwest quadrant. That's got generators, shelters, fencing. That's got all those civil costs figured.
Oh, so the 895 was for both towers, right?
Yes. Yes.
Oh,
yes.
I didn't understand that.
Yeah, and one's new tower, one's an existing.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let me ask a question here. You're planning on a separate tower then, even though we are at the water tower there at LeGrand? Are you planning on putting on something on top of the water tower, or are you building from the ground up?
No. This would just be antennas that are mounted to the existing water tower. And so there wouldn't be no new structure. It should just be antennas welded, for lack of a better term, welded to the existing water tower. And then up near Clemens and St. Anthony, that'd be actually a new physical tower structure that's built there. So one, we would use something existing, and the other, we would build something brand new.
That was the impression I had from the beginning, I guess, when we started talking about this. Yeah. Okay. And how high do you go on that tower at LeGrand then? How far near?
So, most water towers are, 120 to 150 feet. So we're, I don't know exactly how tall that was.
I think that was 140.
Okay.
feet.
So it'd be about 140 feet high at LeGrand.
Weird.
And the new one up by Clemens would be at the top, or 220 feet.
And just to confirm on that question, Mike, with those two towers, that would give us the coverage that we're seeking, right? For the entire county? Yeah,
that's right. So no system design provides 100% coverage, but at the last 911 meeting I was at, Chief Fonts did what I thought was a real good presentation about coverage, where this system provides coverage, where it doesn't provide coverage, and at what level it provides coverage. As a part of any contract that we would sign, we have the coverage that we promise, and then what we call a coverage acceptance test plan, so that when we build it, we actually go out and test for you and prove to you, yeah, in fact, it does give the coverage in all the areas that we said. And if it didn't meet those specifications, then it is on Raycom's responsibility to provide coverage to the level that we promised. And so whatever level that we promise in the contract is what we contractually guarantee that we'll deliver.
Okay.
Is this
And
doable?
again, I'm gonna ask,
I'm sorry.
Is this doable in stages?
So it could be, yeah. You could build one site at one point and another site at another point. But if you're asking a question about budgets and think how you space finances out, generally a project like this would fall over at least 2 and probably 3 budget cycles. And so just from the length of time it takes to order equipment and zone a tower and build a tower and do all the kinds of things. So the cash outlay would flow most likely over 3 budget cycles. And so to do the whole project. And so you could stage it, but just doing it all at once would be staged. The cash outlay would be flow over probably 3 different budget cycles.
And that's where I'm going with this. If we start this project and this is going to be spread over 3 budget years, we can work that in probably without borrowing and without having a too terrible negative effect on the property taxpayer. I'm very concerned about an essential purposes bond because the way that taxes are levied against properties, it would put a further hardship on our agricultural community because they don't enjoy the rollback that residential property taxes pay. And these folks are struggling right now exponentially. And with what's going on with COVID, who knows where our ag community is going to be. And I certainly don't want to put any more burden on them than is absolutely necessary.
I think we've kind of moved on to radios here a little bit. I'm going to ask a question. I think you proposed 498 units. Is that correct?
The proposal is for 309 new units. There's 189 existing right now within the county with Marshalltown Police and Fire and the Sheriff's Office, and I think State Center Police Department. So 189 are existing, 309 new ones to cover the rest of the rural police and fire departments.
So Steve, if you
that makes.
Yeah, if you added up all the first responder radios in Marshall County, there's roughly very close to 500 total first responder radios in the county, and 300 new ones and 200 of them that already exist.
And those are true radios. Those aren't pagers, right? Is any of those pagers?
No, those are all radios. The pagers are separate. There was 287 pagers included in the pricing we provided.
Can I jump in here? It's Jon Thomas from State Center. I want to make sure we understand the number of radios actually being asked for compared to the personnel. And talking with Chief Fonth and some others, I know that there was a formula used in relation to how many seats are in the trucks. So I want to make sure that taxpayers and all the participants understand they're not asking for 1 radio per person, because that would obviously be a much larger number. Am I correct in that? Can somebody add to that?
From what I understand, they were looking at number of seats. Randy, did I see you on here? Brad, are you on here? Can you advise what that number was?
Yeah, so we went off writing positions. That was discussion had with all the fire and EMS chiefs in the county to make it equitable, because some departments may have 35 active people, some may have 8. So we went off seated and writing positions for each apparatus.
And just for anyone that's on here that isn't familiar with that, when they're talking about seated and writing positions in an apparatus, they're talking about, like, the fire truck. If the fire truck holds 4 seats, then that's a seated position. So that's 4 seated positions. Brad, can you confirm that so that everyone is on the same page?
Yes, that is correct.
So Brad, just to help me clarify real quick, how many firefighters do we have in State Center and how many seated positions do we have? Because I think that'll help really give an example that we're really only trying to outfit 1/3 or 1/5 or whatever that number is.
We've got 32, I believe, active personnel right now. And our radio number, our portable radio number was 20, I believe. So we are not obviously getting one per person. Now pagers, obviously we are. That's 1 for 1 because everyone has to be notified. But I don't think there's a single department that, well, I know that we didn't ask 1 radio per person. Now those are portables. Obviously each apparatus has to have a mobile radio, but on the portables, we went by writing position.
Thanks. I just thought it was important that everybody understood that because portables are expensive and I wanted to show that the group as a whole really is trying to be conservative with the dollars and the expense of the project.
Well, and I'd like to go back and touch on something that Dave, you actually said, and I really appreciate your comment there because, you know, I think firsthand we are all seeing how, you know, our current state of crisis is impacting not only our entire country, our state, but our county. You know, and to add that, you know, additional fee and try and find a way to pay for it, being able to take this over 2 or 3 budget cycles, you know, including the towers with the possibility that we might be able to generate some revenue from this, and then including this equipment, I think it helps everyone because it helps the entire county. That includes the SO, that includes all of our volunteer fire departments because, you know, again, these are volunteer, they are volunteering their time to make sure we cover an entire county and make sure that we have a good response for our community.
And Rhonda, maybe just to add to the need on this, and this goes back to a pursuit I was involved with back in September. For those who say, well, if we don't have a lot of fires in that Northwest County, how often are those towers going to be utilized? The sheriff's office would be utilizing those towers probably on a daily basis, certainly a weekly basis. And,
right, and they do.
And I think that that's really something to point out too, is that it not just benefits the fire, but it benefits the EMS also, and also public safety. I think that's just an important point to realize that these towers are going to be utilized on a daily basis by numerous personnel, just not fire.
Correct. And I think that that's one of the advantages that I have, I think, coming in from an outside state, outside agency, outside, because I've worked with those smaller communities and, you know, on a normal day, I think we just think that, well, it's not getting used, but it truly does get used because it's kind of like, you know, think about it in the terms of a cell phone. Cell phones will bounce off of different towers. You know, you have to have that in that area. Otherwise, we're not going to get that coverage that we need. So it absolutely is used. It would be used on a daily, if not weekly basis.
I'm still.
Brad,
go ahead.
Brad, this is Steve Salonson. Can we go back to, there's going to be a mobile radio in each of your units over there too at State Center. Is that the way everybody will be set up? And how many is that for you over there?
That is correct. So every apparatus will have a hardwired mobile radio. And there was some discussion about whether that was a need. And my opinion and quite a few others is that if we rely totally on a portable radio, which is battery operated, there's times we could run the risk where maybe those batteries for whatever reason aren't charged and then we cannot communicate. So I think it's critical to have a mobile in each apparatus that is powered off the vehicle to have something that is, you know, we're always going to be able to communicate if needed. And so that is what every agency is going to do. So every, you know, EMS vehicle or fire truck in the county will have a mobile radio.
And how many is that?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
74 total mobiles.
74 total. So that means there's 74 apparatus in the county.
And that's important, having those mobiles, especially when you're on scene. You don't know how long those scenes are going to last. That's kind of an example of, you know, battery usage. You've got to have that incident command, especially having, you know, a way to get back to the comm center, a way to get other help, mutual aid. So definitely need those.
And
well, and just to go, I'm sorry, Bert, go ahead, Brad.
Sorry, if I might add, you know, our coverage map, outdoor coverage is well over 99% in the county. That's based on a portable radio on your hip. But, you know, it's not a perfect world. So there may be cases where if we're down in a low valley in an area that's marginal coverage potentially, we want the higher wattage from a mobile to be able to get out and communicate too.
And it's the standard. It's really unheard of not to have a mobile in every apparatus in any of the projects that we've done, simply because you can't take a chance of them hopping into the apparatus and heading out on to an incident and not have the portable with them. So they always have that communications there.
Hey, Diane.
Well, you never also know what kind of incident's going to occur. You know, in some of my other communities that I've worked in, we had an incident where a child was lost in the woods. So you had the base station there. That's where those mobile radios also come into play, because you have your base station. And then everyone with a radio, they went out and started searching, but that's how you keep track of everyone, because if there's not enough radios to go around and enough search, you know, people to search in the area, we're not that small of a community. We're going to have those issues here. We've already had those issues. So, it would be very odd to find an agency that doesn't have those mobile based radios.
There's something I evidently am overlooking here because I'm confused somewhat on the number of radio units. If there's 20 radios in State Center, and then I take that times 12 different fire districts, that's 240. And where I guess, help me out here, there's 498 units total, old and new, of the, where am I missing here? 200.
I can break it down for you a little bit. There's 74 mobile radios. There's 224 new portable radios. There's 11 control stations or base stations that would go in facilities. And then 189 existing mobile and portable combination that are out right now with the Marshalltown Police, Marshalltown Fire, I think State Center Police, and the Marshall County Sheriff's Office. So the 189 are existing, already there. And then 74 mobiles, 224 portables, and 11 base stations are new to be purchased and added for all the rural police and fire.
And Diane, correct me if I'm wrong. I realize that some may be looking at the jump that there's currently 189 and they're asking for 224. A lot of that has to do with the fact that the 189, that's not enough, because even just in the short time that I've been here, there's not enough radios available currently. Am I correct in this?
Well, it's two separate buckets. 189 is the Marshalltown Police, Fire, and Sheriff's Office existing radios.
Okay, I gotcha.
Okay, and then the other 309 that we're bringing on are all new radios for rural police and fire.
I gotcha.
Okay.
And just to add one more thing, and Mike Miller might have you confirm this with me, but when back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when the Sheriff's Office and the PD went to the EDAC system, the PD actually tried to essentially put off buying mobiles at first and just run off portables, and kind of quickly found out that model did not work. Where the Sheriff's Office, we put mobiles in our cars right out of the chute and had much better success. Is that accurate, Mike?
Yeah, it's sort of accurate, Chief. It wasn't that they weren't going to use mobiles, it's that they couldn't afford them both in the same budget cycle. So they switched to to one the first year and then put in the mobiles later. And it was just an affordability thing. But I think you're right in the fact that it wasn't the best user experience during that year.
Perfect. Thanks. I just wanted to point out that's been tried or at least experienced, and it was not a successful experiment. It may do for budget reasons, but it's obviously more ideal if we're going to bite the bullet to put the mobiles and the apparatus out of the get-go.
So when you think about coverage, Bill Patton, I think you're the one that asked this question, and Chief, somebody said we are estimating 99% outdoor portable coverage, and that sounds really good, 99%. The public safety standard, usually when we're responding to an RFP, it's 95% or 97%, and we're designing 99%. But Marshall County is 573 square miles in size, and so 99, if we say 99% of that is covered, that leaves 6 square miles spread out throughout the county is potentially uncovered. And so 6 square miles is quite a bit, even though 99% sounds great. And so you really need the mobile radio, because the mobile radio provides 100% coverage throughout the county.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mike and Bill, I'd like to add one comment to that. So if you sent first responders out with portables only, typically they're going to be on their hip, and if they're driving inside a vehicle. And so just because our maps show, let's say 99% portable outdoor coverage, when that first responder gets into his or her vehicle, that no longer is the portable outdoors. It's in a vehicle, and that vehicle does have loss to it. So you lose a lot of signal through the windows and the metal doors and everything. And from what we've seen, it's 10 to 12 dB of signal loss when it's down on their hip. So if you have your portable in your vehicle, it's not portable outdoor coverage. It's a lot closer to something between, your 8 and your 15 dB in building loss is how that portable is going to act. And that's another reason for a mobile in those vehicles.
Yeah, I understand the significance of having that. Just from working on the farm, having one inside and tied in so that there's no battery there and stuff. That's important. I realize that. So if we start the towers, Mike, you said it's going to be 2.5 years.
I said 18 months to 2 years. It's probably in that neighborhood. So let's just just call it 24 months. So.
Okay. So if we start that, and I'm thinking money here, we have to figure out some way of getting this split up some, and because basically the radials they'll be coming right towards the end of the tower work up there, and all of a sudden there's a lot of money. We were wondering if there's some way of some skin in the game on this thing with everybody, and maybe the pagers, maybe part of the radios, if the don't know. I'm just throwing things out here. It looks like the towers have been a county thing in the past, or are, and so the county can talk about that. But those are just things. I'm not asking for any say, hey, we'll do this. No, we're not able to say, hey, we're going to do this today either. So,
What's your address again?
So in looking at this, if I'm correct on this, Bill, so looking at the 2 to 3 budget cycles, we basically got the towers, the radios, and the pagers. And I really like your guys' comments in regards to, you know, obviously our current state of crisis and everything that we're going through. And, you know, Bill, you and I have talked, I think that it's going to take quite some time to move beyond where we're currently at. Is that something that can be separated out over those 2 to 3 budget cycles?
well, that's what Dave was alluding to.
Yeah, and that's why I was his comments, and I really appreciated those because, like I said, I think we all agree that, you know, this is where we want to go, but, you know, what's the best way to get there and make sure that we take care of, you know, the entire county, and first and foremost, you know, the public that we respond to, so our constituents.
I probably wrote this down and I can't find it. What's the Diane probably knows this. What's the cost of a pager?
It's about $335. That's with your programming, the charger, and getting it in the hand of the user.
And then every walk-in volunteer gets one of those, right?
Yeah, there's
They would have to have one. Otherwise they're not going to be able to respond, because even the pages that go out over the cell phones, again, they can sometimes get them 5, 6, 7 hours late.
Sure. Yeah. How many pagers, Diane, did you put down for a cost?
287.
287 pages.
Yes.
Okay, so that catches everybody but the sheriffs. I assume they've got them, deputies, and Marshtown Police. Is that correct? That's why there's a difference in numbers here.
Brad gave me those numbers. Brad, can you maybe expand on that?
Yeah, those numbers are what we were given by every chief in the county for their users. The sheriff's office, Marshalltown Fire, and PD do not carry these pagers. Marshalltown Fire has station alerting because they're in quarters, 24 hours a day.
Okay.
PD and SO are called out for service on their radios. So only the volunteers would need the pagers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Because they're not paid. None of them are paid, correct?
It's because they're not at the station.
Say that again, Rhonda. I'm sorry.
It's because they're not paid, because they're not paid volunteers. They're not always hanging out at the station. That's the reason, right?
Exactly. We need to be notified at home, work, wherever we are.
Exactly.
Yep.
Okay. Diane, what was the cost of the actual radios?
That's a really good question too. There's a variety of radios to choose from. And one of the things that we did in trying to make this as cost effective as possible is Chief Fonts had us figure in the lowest cost radio, but still a great P25 portable. The portable radio, I'm looking on my list here right now, is $1,346.25. And that comes with the battery, the charger, the belt clip. It's a bundle.
What about the mobile radios?
The mobile radios that they selected also they were very conservative with that one as well. And depending on whether it's a remote mount or dash mount, there's a little bit of a price difference. So your remote mount is $2,903.79. And your dash mount is $2,659.46.
And what about the base stations?
And the base stations, because that's got a whole antenna system with it, is $3,596.27.
And is there a particular way that these need to be portioned, or could it be like over these 2-3 budget cycles? Obviously, you have to have towers first, but could we do, X number of this, X number of that over other budget cycles? Does that make sense?
Typically in a project like this, Rhonda, when people are switching from an old radio system to a new radio system, the radios aren't ordered until just a few months before the end of the project. And so let's just say, for an example, you start this in June of 2020, and you'd be done somewhere in the summer of 2022. And so typically you'd order those radios probably January, February, or March of 2022. So you had them just a few months before the system went live. And so most likely you wouldn't have that expenditure until clear at the end of the project. Because people, those volunteer first responders would use the current radio system clear up until, in my example, summer of 2022.
And here's my last question, and I apologize for having so many questions. New girl on the block, y'all.
All right.
The being able to lease out, is that something that would be like, okay, so this is obviously a 2 to 3 year process. Would we not be able to lease out until that's done, or would we be able to lease space out as soon as the tower is built, and that could be 18 months?
Yeah, that's right. You as soon as the new tower is done, you could offer space in that tower for revenue.
So we could theoretically build it to offer space and start generating revenue towards some of these purchases. Is that correct? Before the entire project is complete?
You could. I'll caution you on that, is that probably the longest piece of the project is building the new tower. That just takes the longest period of time. All the things that have to go into that. And so my guess would be that new tower would be completed, would be one of the last things that was completed, would be my guess. I don't know for sure, but typically that's the way it would go.
So you're not saying 18 months, you're saying the 3 years it would take? No,
I think that if I said to Bill just a bit ago that the project, let's just say it took 2 years, that tower would be constructed towards the end of the 2 years, not at the beginning of the 2 years, just because how long it takes to build a tower.
Okay.
Rhonda, so I think we're going to have, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, you're fine. Go ahead.
I think we're going to have to get to a point where you're going to have different areas of responsibility here.
Right.
I believe the county is going to and should rightfully be responsible for the towers. And I believe the incorporated towns and the townships of their fire departments should be responsible for the pagers and the radios. So as far as financing here, I think we're talking 2 different areas and 2 different responsibilities. Something that was asked at a previous meeting, had the county ever taken out an essential purposes bond for this before? And my answer was no. We have taken out essential purposes bonds for things that had to do with maintenance repairs at the courthouse, but not for supplementing any additional budgets within the township fire departments or the incorporated communities fire departments. And I think my words were taken a little bit out of context there. So I just want to make that clear that we have not done an essential purposes bond previously to assist in any of the fire departments or the townships with this. Now, the county can always be the funding mechanism and the backbone for that, with those entities repaying that bond, very similar to what's probably going to happen with the new fire station upgrade in Green Mountain. They're an unincorporated area, so they don't have the ability to borrow money. The proposal there is that the county takes out the bond for them with that township and the 3 townships that are in that fire district repaying through their township levy. So it's not really that the county is borrowing the money, but those individual fire districts within the township is repaying the funds, not the entire county taxpayer base, but the actual townships that borrow the money. And I think we could do something similar here. It's going to take some work, but I think that the county can probably work out doing the towers and that equipment, and we can work out some other agreement where the individual townships and incorporated towns can purchase their own equipment.
And that totally makes sense, Dave. But my only question is, and it goes back to, you know, the comments, because I know that, you know, you've been on top of this COVID-19 issue and the worry about the farmers and the smaller communities. When I'm looking at the costs for the mobile radios and the base stations, and, you know, they have to have the portables, you know, there, and the fact that, and Bill, I apologize again, but what was the percentage for the levy? You said like 0.67, I think it was.
I think, no, 0.6076 or 7.
So basically 0.6, right?
Right.
So my only concern on that is the mere cost that it would take. So I guess what my hypothetical question would be is, what will we do in the event that a community, I'm not sure which one, because I'm sure everyone has their own, you know, level. Some may be able to afford it, some may not. But what are we going to do in the event that they can't afford the equipment? So there's no responders for that community or the residents in that community.
Okay, keep in mind the individual budgets for these fire departments come from 2 different areas.
Okay.
They come from the incorporated community, and let's use State Center as an example.
Okay.
You've got the taxable levy base within the incorporated community of State Center. And then you have the fire districts that also are served out of that fire department. And those dollars come through the township levy into that fire department's budget.
Okay.
So you've really got 2 pools of money to deal with, not necessarily just what is from the townships, but also what is from the incorporated cities, whether it is Rhodes, Melbourne, LeGrand, Haverhill, State Center, Ames, Albion, not Ames, Albion. You know, you've got the incorporated town, and then you have the townships on top of that.
Yeah, Rhonda, this 0.6 is for the township, not the municipal town.
Okay.
It's, and Rhonda, just to clarify, it's 60 3/4 cents. So townships are allowed to levy 40.5 cents, and then they can also levy an additional 20 1/4 if they choose to. So the maximum levy that a township can apply to their taxpayers is 60 3/4 cents. And that's mandated by the state. They can't go over that. That's set by state code.
It's capped. Yep.
Yep.
I have been after our state legislators to increase that levy for our townships for this very reason for a number of years. I would encourage everybody that's on this meeting today that we literally form a commission or a coalition and lobby our state legislators, both in the Senate and the House, being Senator Edler and Dean Fisher through the House, that we work at getting a larger portion of the 911 dollar that is siphoned off by the state, that we get more of those dollars returned to us so that we can have this for our own local communication system, and that we take a 2-prong approach and implore the legislature to increase the amount that the townships can levy for items just exactly like this.
Hey, Dave.
Yes.
Larry Fricky. I'm on the Clemens department. I was just doing some rough figuring, and roughly for us, for our mobile radios, it would run around 21,000. As far as, let's see, handhelds would be 14,000. Pagers would run 4,000. And anyway, I had 3,600. I can't read my writing there, but that comes out $30,000 roughly per radio cost for our mobile, and I was figuring 7 mobile units. That's how many trucks we have now. I'll use like our rescue truck. It'll hold 6 people, but we only figured that for 1 radio. We didn't figure it as 1 handheld for each seated position, like we had that discussion earlier.
I understand.
Well, anyway, as I was going through that, our budget is split 75%. We have Minerva, Marietta, Bangor, and Liberty Townships, and Bill Patton, I think, is one of ours. Anyway, we take 75% of our budget goes to those 4 townships, and then we take 25% of our budget, which is equally split between Clemens and St. Anthony. So they pick up 25%. I think this year, I'd have to look at the exact numbers, but I think our yearly budget was 30,450 or 30,250, something like that for the whole year. So what we're talking, if we were to have to fund that, it would take our whole budget for the whole year.
I understand. And, you know, Mike Miller brought up earlier that this could be done over a 3-year period. Maybe there's a possibility of you guys adding to your budget 1/3 each year for 3 budget years and putting that into a fund. So when it does come to the point where these radios have to be purchased, you have the funds available. That way you've levied it not only to the taxpayers within your incorporated community, but into your township 1/3 a year for 3 years, and literally set the funds aside in a restricted spending account. So that's what you had to do with them.
You have to remember though that if we ask for that budget, it's going to be over a year and a half before we collect it, because it's got to go out to the taxpayer. We're always that year behind. So
right, we're 18 months in arrears on property tax collection.
That's what I'm getting at. So in the short term, we have no way of collecting that money up front to provide that radio system.
And I think based on that, we could come up with some sort of possibility where this could be funded by the county with repayments over a period of time over these budgeted years, so that it can come back in, because we can react much faster than the individual townships or the incorporated areas. You could still be responsible for the funding, but you could pay it over a period of time back to the county so that we could be your funding mechanism, no different than we're going to be the funding mechanism for the Green Mountain expansion project. There's ways we can do this. We're just going to have to get a little creative and work together, and it can be done.
I also feel that if you get a radio just given to you and you're a volunteer fire department, I think you take better care of it if you got a little skin in the game and have help pay for it. I think when you just pass things out and say, okay, that's yours, they don't get used properly. No, I'm just guessing, but that's what I've seen in my lifetime going through the Army and so on and so forth. I think that's human nature.
You know, I think we've had a lot of real good discussion this morning. I think there's been some good ideas thrown around. I'd like to get all of this figures and proposals done from Raycom, Diana, from you, down in black and white with numbers. If there's a possibility that we could maybe break this down by fire department, what their individual share could be, let us put our thinking cap together on and figure out if the county, if we can work this out where we could spread the cost of the towers over possibly 3 budget years based on construction, possibly put together a program where, because of the inability for some of the smaller areas to do this funding, that we could fund it for them, with them repaying us back over a 3-year period, because the collections on property taxes come in 18 months in arrears. And let us do our magic on the funding area, and you get us the dollar figures on each individual area, what it would be, and give us some time to do this. It's not going to be done in a week, and come back and revisit this and put a proposal together for everybody on the table and see if we can get this thing done right, have everybody have skin in the game, and put this to bed and get on with solving this problem.
Sounds great. I can get the numbers out to you this morning after our call here.
Wonderful.
Super.
Hey guys, I just have one more question if I could. I just wanted to double check and I just want to double check that my understanding is correct. Based on the tower system that we currently have, none of the smaller agencies have had to pay any kind of monthly access fee or anything like that. Is that correct?
That's right. They owned the system, so there was
Okay.
no.
Have they ever had to pay for their radios and pagers in the past, or where did that come from?
We've always had to pay for our rate. Anytime we bought a new radio or a pager, we've always been, for Clemens anyway, we've always purchased them. We either get them from the beeper people, either Raycom or over there to Ames at the place over there. I can't remember the name.
Okay, and it's just like one at a time, not just the big grouping at once. Okay, all right.
Yeah, we usually try to budget.
That's somewhat accurate, folks. At one time, it's been several years ago. It's been back when the system was upgraded, maybe 20 years ago. The 911 board did provide a certain amount of mobiles and portables to each one of the volunteer agencies, but that's been 20 years ago, and there was more money in the 911 funds back at that point, just based on the way it worked then. Landline funds came to the 911 commission, and those funds could be used for that. And landline funds still come to the 911 commission, but fewer and fewer landlines are out there. Cell phone 911 charges go to the state at this point, and then they divvy them out as how they see fit. So at one time, the 911 board in the county did provide equipment to the agencies, but it was probably 18, 20 years ago, something like that.
But it was only a certain number, and then they purchased above and beyond that. Is that what you're saying, or did I misunderstand?
Yes, yeah, Rhonda. How that worked was there each one of the individual agencies were contacted, and kind of on the same plan that's been used here, number of seats in the vehicle, and each mobile unit, each truck or ambulance or whatever responding unit needed a mobile, and so those were all upgraded at that time. Again, that was 20 years ago, but it was kind of the same formula that is being used now.
Okay.
I also wanted to just point out, Rhonda, you had asked for the radio prices. I gave you the price of the radios. There's also other things to think about along with that is the cost of the installation, of the programming, of accessories like speaker mics and carrying cases and things like that go along with it. So those are in the numbers that I'll send over to the board, but I want you to make sure we're considering overall the cost of what the subscribers are, not just the radio cost. There's other costs that are associated with that.
Yeah,
I thought it was, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I appreciate you saying that. I assumed that, but I'm glad that you clarified it. So, okay. Sorry, Bill, go ahead.
I was thinking it was around $1,500, $1,500 to $1,700.
Yeah, I think it's closer to 17 for the portable. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate everybody coming today and giving us a lot of really good things and then explaining them to us, because sometimes we don't understand that. So we appreciate all the time you put into this, and this gives us a little bit more knowledge for us to go ahead and try to get something put together that's going to help everybody.
I would agree with Bill. We got a lot of real good information here today in a very calm manner. I appreciate that from everybody. I've never been an individual that likes to look at life through the rearview mirror. There's nothing we can do about what's been done in the past. Let's keep looking through the front windshield and get this thing done. Look forward to getting the information from Raycom on the proposals and being able to separate the dollars out and working out something where we can get everybody to have, as Bill puts it, skin in the game, and spread this cost out amongst a larger area so that it's no real burden on any one given organization, and go from there.
Hey, Guy, to the Board of Supervisors, I just want to thank you for putting this meeting together. Mike Miller for putting together your team. I mean, you have a ton of resources here. Every question that's been asked today has been able to be answered in real time with real numbers. And I think for those of us on the user end of this, we're feeling a lot more comfortable and a lot more optimistic about where this is going. So open lines of communication are great. And I just want to thank everybody for making this meeting happen. And I think a lot of us are very optimistic now.
I'd like to leave it with one last thing here. I'd like to get a small group of representatives from each of these different organizations and areas together, probably being the Sheriff's Association, maybe something from Chief Tupper and the League of Cities, our rural firefighters, working with the County Board of Supervisors, and let's get together with our state legislators and figure out a way we can approach them and get a larger chunk of the funding from the 911 surcharge coming back to the local municipalities, because quite honestly, all these problems are local. They're not on the state side. So the communications that go out through the state kind of piggybacks on us. We don't piggyback on them. So I'd like to see us get together and try and get a larger cut of the pie that comes in off of these surcharges so that we can eliminate these problems.
Sheriff Hoffman here. I would like to echo the comments that have been made with Chief Thomas and Supervisor Thompson. I'm really excited to listen to this progress on this important project, and knowing that we all have an affinity for our volunteers and the service that they provide. And obviously this project, the scope of it, has a great enhancement for the safety of my deputies too, as well as Marshalltown Police and State Center Police and Melbourne Roads Police. And I'm really looking forward to the advancement of this project and the positive steps that have been taken here this morning. Thank you all.
Well, I think we've been about an hour and 50 minutes here for this meeting. I would move for adjournment here, and let's consider Dave's option here of getting a group together and doing something down the road soon. If there's no other questions or comments, I would move to adjourn. Next regular session is April 28, 2020 at 9:05 a.m. All business to be acted upon at that session should be submitted to the County Auditor and Recorder's Office or the Board of Supervisors Office by Thursday, April 23rd, 2020 at 1 o'clock. There being no further business to come before the board, the meeting's adjourned at 10:47. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Have a good day. Stay safe, stay healthy, everybody.
You guys too.
All righty. Bye-bye.